You've been such a leading voice in this discussion around Black Lives Matter corporately. Can you just take us back a little and share a little bit around your story and the work that you're doing now in the space?
Sure. I mean, it's still early days. So just like the white community is reconciling with racism as a sort of general worldview that's been in front of them but hard to see, this purpose has been in front of me, but it's been hard to see. And so I'm getting to that point where there's a lot more clarity, but it stems from just an unwavering belief in, the fact that equality is real. It's not just a word that belongs in the dictionary. It's real. Like, we have to live by that. And so for me, when these actions and situations transpired, it's kind of hard to be a Black leader in brand and not speak up, especially when your family's Black. I mean, obviously, clearly, I'm not going to be able to peel my skin away from, anytime soon. And so for me, it was always about lending my voice to it in a way that would add value. How's it been going? Amazing. As you can imagine, there's a ton of great response, but those responses are about, there's a sense of liberation that's coming from this in terms of people being able to speak up. And I think it's important that they have, a reference point that, speaks, truth to power, and sort of make it clear that it's okay to speak up and that you're enough and that what you're doing is enough, and that you can be whoever you want to be. There's no rules that govern, who we become. We govern that. And so my purpose so far has been add a voice to the narrative that's going to help improve the trajectory of people of color, in particular, those that are coming up, help them avoid some of the pitfalls that are sort of intrinsically built in systematic racism that's hard to see. And for those of us that have seen it, absorbed it, I want to make sure that I shed a light on those so that they can accelerate their growth, and avoid some of those pitfalls that I unfortunately had to go through.
One of the things that really excites me about where we're at now is I feel it's such an open conversation and so many people want to support. If everyone's guided on how they can support and what they can do, I really hope and pray that there's a point of validation where people are really feeling.
Yeah, I mean, yes, absolutely. That's the end goal, right? And I think it goes beyond validation. It's just acceptance, because it's the right thing. We're all human. I think what you're seeing is, again, I said earlier, the people are reconciling. I mean, you have to remember that we don't even have to go back 450 years. That's beyond the human imagination. Let's go back 60 years to the 60s till now and think about some of the systematic, deliberate, systematic infrastructures that over time have eroded the upward trajectory of the Black community at large. And those things they're not in academic books. They're not written anywhere that says this is how these groups will be treated. It's woven into the fabric of society. So when you're looking for a loan for an amazing idea, right? That loan is 10x harder for you if you happen to be a person of color, in particular if you live in a certain neighborhood. Those are systematic, sort of invisible rules that nobody speaks to, but those rules are the reasons why we are where we are now, because what they have it's a compounding effect over generations. So it's not that they come and necessarily take your entire house away. No, they make it difficult for you to ever build wealth. And so what you're seeing and sort of experiencing, especially from the Black community, is the straw that broke the camel's back. We can see the systematic racism that we're experiencing. It's all around us. And I think what we're feeling and what's exciting about this is, for the first time, we can actually pinpoint, those subtleties. Amy Cooper, Central Park. I mean, I saw that woman on television and I could see 100 Amy Coopers I've experienced in my lifetime.
Yeah.
Who are, seemingly really amazing people until you cross a certain threshold that wasn't acceptable to them, whether it's a point of view they don't like or whatever it might be. And that's when you see their true colors. That for me is the most dangerous form of racism there is. And that type of racism is what systematic racism is built on. It's built on that. There's a layer of, there's a narrative, there's a language that those in the white community who choose to exercise these supposed rights understand. Is I always tell my black friends, you know, it's a little bit like, you know, when I'm walking in a crowded place and I see the other lone isolated black guy, and we always like, what's up? You know, that it's like our thing, you know, it's there's no book for that. It's just woven into the fabric of our culture. Well, my argument is that I think racism has the same role to play in the white community. And so, and I think that the comfort and the sort of the way in which they've been able to apply it is make it difficult to talk about race and make it seem as though race is something that, oh, you're being paranoid. There's no such thing as color. Well, there is. I can see it and now it's playing out. And so I think there's been comfort in the silence that's no longer there. And so now the mirror has been flipped the other way, and we're telling the white community that racism is a white disease, not a black one. It's no longer good enough to tell me to be the problem. It's weird to have the oppressor tell the oppressed to tell him how to fix a problem they created. It's just, it doesn't add up. And so there's a lot of internal soul searching, I think, that needs to happen amongst the white community. And it needs to be a candid, honest, you know, look at introspective, ask yourself as a person, be honest. I think it's in this day and age, honestly, I would respect those around me who put their hands up and said, look, unbeknown to me, I have some type of racist tendencies, because it's subtle, it's conditioned. I don't hold that at fault, but it's important that it's acknowledged, because if it's not acknowledged, then we can't have an equal footing to have a conversation. So the first thing that has to happen is acknowledgement.
You know, I love hearing you talk. I trust you with my life. So I feel like I could ask you any question on the planet. But what you're talking about is much deeper than unconscious bias, actually.
I think sometimes it's conscious bias, which is also really dangerous. You know, that was my personal experience, because that was conscious bias. That was consciously using my seniority and my race and my color and all the things that, you know, should have been celebrated as they weaponized it for their gain and left me and my family isolated, you know, well, they did, but the point is, and this is why diversity in the workplace is so critical. Just the work ethic alone that got me in the room is the same work ethic that saw me not only come into Nike, but excel beyond anybody's imagination. Work ethic. So if you're hiring someone like me, what do you inherit? Work ethic. That's just the basic, right? Then you have the culture, the Black culture, which is as rich and as wide and as deep as any culture out there. Yet the story we get told is that we're all vanilla. No two Black people are the same, just like no two white people are the same. But they're Black. It's like we're one gigantic organism. You know, as a European, as an African born Black man. So I'm from Africa, born. I could take you to where I was born. I remember the mango trees and the coconut trees I used to climb. God, I miss those days. They shall be back. But as an African Black man who has had the fortunate privilege of actually growing up, so I have that heritage. But then I have a European portion of me, which is a significant portion of my actual world experience as a Black man from Africa. So not only have I got the Africa culture, I also have the European perspective, both in the UK and in Holland, for significant portions of my life. And then coupled with that, global roles that had me traveling around the entire globe. So I was getting perspective across, you know, Mexico, Japan, China, you know, you name it, I've been. You know, and then you extend that to the US, that gives me 4 continents of experience and wealth that most people would, you know, don't have. And amongst all of that, I grew and developed myself to become one of the most senior people in brand at Nike. That was my career path at a very young age. The point I'm telling you all of this is because that work ethic meant I had to climb 2 mountains before I could even be in the room. So it was woven in before I could even be in the conversation about being a Nike employee. But there I was. And when I got there, I took it with both hands and I ran with it. I ran as fast as I possibly could because I'm about breaking the cycle. So when I ran with it, I was running it with intent of acquiring as much as I can, both in knowledge and personal wealth and professional growth, and reflecting that back onto my family so that we break that cycle. That's still going to happen with or without Nike. That was never Nike's to take away from me. I have every intention of going exactly what I had planned in the first place, but their path is different, which is fine. The work ethic is still the same. Do you see? So this is where I think companies are missing out. You're missing out on, you don't, there's a reason they tap into Black culture. Black culture drives culture. So if you're an organization that's using Black individuals in your work and you somehow are not rewarding and incentivizing them, that's not, it's their right, it's their work, it's their art, it's their intellectual property. And so I'm saying from here on out, you'll find that a lot more creatives are going to want to keep the rights of their work, because that's the long-term wealth. That's where it really is, not in the temporary, here is a check that feels good for a month or 6 months for a year. No, here is a piece of work that will continuously feed you and your family generationally in some cases. That's where we're at now. And so I think that recognition by the Black community that they are good enough, and actually they've been powering a lot of these things around us, that's what we're dealing with. And so I'm excited by that. I think it's a good thing, not a bad thing. I think it's an additive. It's not a subtractive. Doesn't subtract, because at the end of the day, having a richer, diverse company in the end will affect positively on your bottom line. It just will. How does that not work in your favor as an organization? So I think the challenge we have now is how do we get CEOs to effectively fly the plane and change the engine at the same time? And by that, I mean, how do we get CEOs to, stand for BLM, but also acknowledge that you're having this BLM conversation in the first place because there is systematic racism in your organization. What that means is half your team is split, even if they're not saying it. You don't have 100% diverse pool. Fact, otherwise you wouldn't be having the conversation in the first place. As a CEO, that's a really tough situation to be in when you run a company of 200,000 plus employees around the world with different backgrounds, different cultures, different world beliefs, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, we have a long way to go.
Are you seeing, Danny, a lot of corporate leaders step up to the mark in the way that you would have hoped?
No, but I think it's early. I think, if I'm being really honest, I try and think as a CEO, if I was to put myself in the shoes of any CEO, take color out of it, just be a CEO. This situation we're in is 2 months old. We're dealing with a problem that's over 50 plus old, over 400. But if we're talking about systematic in terms of how, let's give it 60 years. So no, I don't expect anybody to have the magic, the secret formula for how you solve it. What I would like to see, and I've seen in spaces, is intent.
Yeah.
At this stage, I can only ask for, and it's real intent with a certain level of accountability,
yeah,
certain level of transparency,
yeah,
a whole lot of human and love and respect, and the belief that we are better as one. We're better together than apart. If you don't, as a CEO, if I was a CEO, that would be my approach today. As a VP, that would have been my approach. Black, white, blue, didn't matter. That for me those are the formulas. I don't know how else you get to a better place. The narrative isn't going to go away. I certainly am not going to stop talking. You know me, I've got a big gob. I'll just keep talking about this. Because,
thank God, Danny. Tell me.
I think it's important. Yes.
When I lived in the UK, one of the things and this is 30 years ago, as a 21-year-old, I felt like the UK was completely united. I mean, on our team, we had a real mix of, I worked in publishing, it was black, white, mixed, and it really didn't feel like bias. Was that just a carryover from the way my parents felt? Or when you were in the UK, did you feel?
There's the difference. Yeah, I think and maybe I'll compare, this is probably a good comparison to have, which is UK, Holland, and the US. In the UK, and I put UK and Holland as one, as Europe, we tend to be a lot more open about race. And I think some of that's to do with just the natural landscape of the way we live. You know, it's very rare you have, you know, houses that are sort of detached from each other, that where you don't necessarily have to interact with your neighbor. You know, in America, for example, I could easily get into my garage, jump in my car, get out of my garage, leave my home without ever interacting with a neighbor. And that culturally is something that I've noticed here was really odd for me, because to your point, in Europe, we kind of coexist. We're forced to by proximity. That the architecture is smaller, it's more narrow. You can practically hear your neighbor next door. You know, and over time you build a certain level of understanding and love for each other's culture. You know, there isn't this segregation. I never felt my color till I came here. I mean, of course I know I'm black, and of course there is racism in the UK. Absolutely, there's racism. But the way that the system at least worked when I was growing up was, my friends were an eclectic, God, we're an eclectic bunch. We're all over the shop, and we still are. You know, and so I don't get that here. I think in the US, and these are I think some of the real byproducts of systematic racism. When you create redlining,
Yeah,
and you segregate groups, and you say you live here, okay, so there's never a time in the day where you're forced to interact with your opposite neighbor of race. You never get the chance to just simply sit and have a beer outside on your porch with your black, because it's just, there's a few, but it's not the norm. The only time they interact is forced environments, which is the working environment. So if you happen to be either black or white in the US, for the most part, those two worlds are two different worlds. When they come together, they're coming together with their perspective on each other, and they're forced to work. But the power is still in the hands of the oppressor, which isn't the black man. So here we are. I think that there is a lot of deliberate actions needed by corporate America if it's serious about this issue of solving racism. It has to be serious about it, because the black community are done. And I can't obviously speak for the entire community, but I will tell you
yes,
how.
you can, Danny.
I'm not sure they all want me to, but I'm not sure they necessarily will give me that.
Corporate voices to corporate America, I think it really needs that.
Sure.
People,
No, absolutely. For corporate America, absolutely. I will lend my voice to that all day, every day, because that's my story. That's my personal story. And so it comes from a place of authenticity, and honesty and transparency. I'm not asking corporate America to do anything else other than what is the right thing to do, which will benefit your business. I just don't see how the two formulas are not understood. But I can acknowledge that whilst reconciling, it's hard to determine. I know a lot of really amazing white leaders who, you know, you would assume wouldn't have the answer, and they don't. And they say, look, Danny, I need your help. You know, and I will, for those, I get on calls, and I'll consult with them, and I'll help them shape their narrative. I'll help them have a worldview that's their own. It's coming from them, but it's their perspective on the situation. And oftentimes what I find is that they need somebody to tell them that to simply be human. And if you take that filter on anything, so if you have to write a company email out, well, write a human email and acknowledge the fact that you have this issue isn't one side or another, but you take your stance. In this case, happens to be LM because you care about this community. Well, great. Now create a scenario where the two opposites can come together in ways that's meaningful, that's actually going to build understanding, appreciation, love for each other, because there's beauty on both sides. But right now it feels one-sided. Do you see? There's beauty on both sides, but it feels one-sided. And so how do we make it, to your point earlier about validation? That's really what it is. It's a recalibration of the wealth distribution. It's really social economics. You know, it boils down to social economics too. Like, that's where, if we had to really chip away at the core, you know, if the wealthier you have, the less people care about your race, right? It's, you know, if we could, it's just the way the world works.
the idea that giving access in a very simple form
Oh,
to,
yeah, I mean, Um, I personally think that, oh, I think it's exciting times, Sue.
Mm.
I mean, look, the tools and the ingredients needed to speak to 1 billion people are right here.
Yeah.
So you can park the technology conversation. What that tells me then is you need a unique product, a unique formula, and a unique structure, and that will serve people. That's the first thing. The second thing is we've moved from the information age. You remember how it used to be the tech information? Well, that's because we were feeding technology into the internet, the system, so that we could access information. It's now hit a critical mass. So now we're in the age of the reputation age. It's the same moment that I unfortunately had my circumstance. So in real time, as myself as the guinea pig, I could see the impact of having false information about you or on the internet permanently and the impact it has. What I'm getting to is that was 2 years ago. Now with what's happened with COVID, this content creation that we're doing is happening across the globe. We're flooding this machine with even more content. And this content is permanent. So these videos we're doing are going to have value, not just today, tomorrow, but long after I'm gone. Someone's going to discover this video, and I hope that person listening to you and I talk are going to watch this video and get mobilized and energized, motivated, and realize that they can do whatever they want. So I don't do these videos just because they're fun to do, although they're fun. I love talking with smart people about this subject matter. But I also believe that this is content that stays on. It's content that will feed generation after generation. You know, it's amazing for my son to go on YouTube and just like, Dad, I just found a video of you. It's like, I got a bit nervous. I was like, what video? I wasn't quite sure. You know, there's nothing inappropriate, of course, but you know, he goes on there and he watches the video, and it was my hero talk. And my son came back and said, Dad, I could see my son sort of looking at me with sort of slightly different eyes, but in a positive way. Because he's never seen me in that context before. I'm just his dad, you know. So all these things we're doing are adding to, you know, they're adding to the narrative. They're positive. They stay on LinkedIn. They stay on Twitter. They resurrect themselves in a blog post somewhere. They show up on Medium. Like, that's why this is important. Continuing to have that dialogue is important, because our voice will be consumed and it won't be buried in a book somewhere. It's interactive. I still have people reaching out to me saying, I read your Medium article just now. I wrote it almost 2 months ago.
Yeah.
And that will continue.
That will live on, by the way. That was very cool. And I hear you on that, because it's almost, if you have the intention and then you have the tool and then the content around that, you can empower and galvanize hundreds of millions of people.
And of course, the work ethic.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you have all those things and you haven't got the drive to actually turn it into something, it won't be anything. But point being, we all have, you know, I did a video back at Nike called Channel Me, and it was all about this. It's the idea that we're all walking TV channels now. It's called YouTube. You know, we're all walking social media platforms now. It's called Facebook, Instagram. You know, we're all photographers now. Instagram. It's all at our fingertips. So now the question becomes, how does your content stand out? And that's what I specialize in. I help brands do that. It's help them distinguish and create differentiation, stand out from the pack, right?
And do you think, Danny, that brands have a bigger role? Because as I hear you talk, I mean, imagine if, you know, brands want to sell us stuff. I get that. But it's this world where they can now bring real value to our lives. I mean, imagine if Nike really, really commit to Black youth, then financially empower us, 10, 100 million of us, you know, do something that is very real and tangible, not just, you know, talking the talk.
Again, yes, and this is applicable to every company in corporate America. It's applicable to every single one of them. I think, you know, I've been involved in some of these campaigns in the past, right? All the way up to Colin Kaepernick's piece. Like I've been involved, so I know what's involved in them. And at the time when you're doing it, you feel as a Black leader that you're adding to the cause because you're consumed with the Kool-Aid all the way up to the brim, right? So you're adding to the cause. And then you roll it out just like you would any marketing campaign, and you sort of see the results of that. I've always done that, thinking in my mind that that action was actually adding real positive value to the Black community. Did it? Maybe. Have I got ways of knowing? Absolutely no. So there's a real issue with transparency. That's the first thing. The second thing I would say is that when it comes to the way that we currently market to the Black community, the Black community's culture, design are all of those things that are put at the forefront of work. But at the table, you're not necessarily using those individuals to help filter. That's how you end up with tone deaf work that just doesn't cut, doesn't resonate. You look at it and you go, this is inappropriate. Because your audience and the people that have that key, the audience, the people that, the leaders that have the ability to, approve that work, have not respected the Black voice at the table, yet it's the same community whose creativity and culture you're about to leverage to sell the shoe or sell that. And that for me is across the board. I've got friends, individual designers who have submitted work and later on found that piece of work on a store of the company that they had pitched the idea to, with no acknowledgement of their involvement, or a jewelry company that would go to some small indigenous village in Latin America and love the product, yet you don't heroize the people that make this product. It's their story that you're leveraging. Those things for me are really beautiful, but we haven't placed value on those things yet. Transparency, I keep saying it, transparency is currency in this day and age. I don't think that the Black community are going to sit back and be used in that way any longer. I can't see it. I certainly won't do it. And I know I'm not alone when I say that. So what you're seeing now is the true realization that we have a significant part to play in the way the world turns. We always have done. We always have done.
Actually, even they say even the women's movement was actually born from Black women's voices who didn't tolerate anymore.
That's what Me Too movement was, and the same goes for Black Lives Matter. I think the Black woman's voice is an amazing one that has not even been. We haven't come close to tapping into that voice, and that voice is incredible. That voice is, oh my God, it's rich, art, culture, design, entrepreneurship. I mean, what can't that voice do? And you're feeling the power of it in BLM. Black Lives Matter primarily been driven by the Black female voice. Their voice is what's carrying this, and the youth, as far as I'm concerned. I think those are the two pockets of high energy that's carrying the rest of us along with it. We're all sort of mere followers of this, because I've seen things that I'm just like, it just blows my mind. Some things that are happening around us being driven by Black women. And I just think more power to them, and it's long overdue.
And how do corporate leaders give fuel to that?
By being very deliberate in their actions. Very deliberate. The days of, we're just going to hire a head of diversity and, no, we're not interested in that. It's give us tangible, realistic quotas that are real and are honest and are deliberate, and track them and be public about it and be transparent about it. Help us understand what you're doing internally to actually change the way that institutional systematic racism affects people of color. Help us understand how you're dealing with sexism in the workplace. Help us understand how you're dealing with ageism. I mean, these are all entities in themselves that we could have a whole session just in those isms alone.
Yeah.
So this problem is huge. In other words, start being human. Do everything. It's just plain simple. Do every action you have. If you apply whether it's sexism, racism, ageism, or any other ism you can think of, we can all make human decisions in the moment. And unconscious bias is one that we all have to acknowledge we have. Because if you can't acknowledge it, then you can't address it. If you can't address it, then you're part of the problem.
Mm.
Or if you're choosing not to address it or acknowledge it, then you're part of the problem.
Yeah.
You just are. And so the days of sort of being able to hide under the cloak of, oh, there's no race here, you're being paranoid, or it's gone. You can see that this voice of mine and everybody else around me, that is the real voice. What actually people should be excited about is getting to know their honest neighbor as they are, as their real honest self. And I think that for those that choose to embrace this moment, it's a positive change, not a negative. This makes the world better. It just does.
Oh my God, yes. I mean, it's growing up on the other side of the world, I find it just so intolerable that we're actually in this
Yeah.
place now.
Yeah.
And I listen to you and I feel really inspired and I want to help accelerate change. And actually hearing you say that the youth are really grabbing this and owning it, and beyond aspiring, they are there. Like, we've just got to help open the door, tell them lovingly that they're welcome, and then somehow accelerate all these things, whether it's access to financial literacy tools, whether it's just, you said to me a couple of weeks ago, I said, what else can I do? And you said, just support a couple of kids, mentor a couple of kids, these kind of things which I've done, by the way.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear it.
You told me two things, Danny, of which I've done both. And it's made me think about all the things that I'm not doing, actually. And I almost think if every leader asked themselves those questions,
Right.
and mentoring people or having an open door or access flows down through the organization, then that's a big step.
I love that. And I'm glad, thank you for doing that, because as you can tell, I believe in that. I think I put all my, white friends on the spot. I said, I appreciate what you're doing in the corporate environment. I want to know what you personally are doing. And it can extend from anything, people will put in however much they're comfortable with. And I don't think there is any sort of, threshold for what's acceptable or isn't. It's not the point. It's back to the intent. If all you can do, or anyone, if all I could spare was a 15-minute phone call a week, okay, well, I'm going to focus that around some type of BLM, driven activity. Great. That's adding value to the narrative. And so I'll tell you right now, the Black community appreciates what you've just done there, because what you're saying is we're one, and I'm gonna embrace, and through that, so you're gonna learn a ton too. Mentor, a person of color is an initiative that any organization can pick up and have running in a matter of days, if not weeks. And it's easy and it's flexible, and you'll be giving so much to that community. You're sharing the knowledge, because remember, a lot of this is you're breaking the cycle of, it's just a lack of knowledge. In the white communities, lack of knowledge of the Black narrative, the real Black narrative, and just how bad it is. And for us, I think it's a lack of it's this assumption that the system that we've been born into is the system, and over time with knowledge, we've learned that system is it's not how it should be. Yeah. So there is this sort of general awareness and sort of collective eye-opening that's happening, which I think is the healthiest thing that's happened to this country in a long time. I mean, I was go as far as to say, America could do with a giant sofa where the entire population get on the sofa and, have a spliff together or something. And yes, I said it.
But it is,
it's just, yeah, it's dialogue is huge. I mean, you watch some of these people and the way they're responding to this Black Lives Matter and the hatred and the anger, and you really, I'm a bit taken aback. I don't understand where it comes from, and that bit's somewhat worrying. Where it worries me is those that have that but have hidden it really well. Amy Cooper, the individuals that chose to use me weaponize me in that way, knew what they were doing. And these were individuals that had time on their hands. You had 2 whole years where you could have at any point came up to me and said, whatever your grievances was, and made that clear. Instead, you waited and made the New York Times and the court of public opinion my judge, jury, and convictor. I mean, that's what we're dealing with. And in my case, you know, I got lucky. I got lucky in that, in a weird way, divine intervention gave me this moment, this time and opportunity to speak up and speak my truth. And you know, how grateful am I for that? Because as you know, Sue, you were there. You've been amazing throughout that journey as I was trying to sort of reconcile and make sense of the trauma, which is what it was. Now with time and hindsight, I realized I was going through trauma. I mean, that's how you know, mentally damaging systematic racism is. And then people wonder, well, why is there a high depression rate in the Black communities? Because we're constantly there's two worlds in our minds. It's one that the aspirations we have, and the reality of the hurdles we have to go through in order to acquire those things or those goals. And those things, up until now, we've never been able to speak to it. We just all seen it as default, and it's not. It's called inequality, and it's called systematic racism. So, you know, the dialogue.
That is deep, and yeah, it's not unconscious bias. Almost makes it light. It's conscious, as you say. It's conscious bias.
They know.
It's deep, and it needs to be talked about. And look, we don't want to tread on eggshells. We want to have the open, difficult conversations, but as long as the intention is pure. And I still believe that there's the majority of people have really good intentions to unite and come together, like your giant couch, which I really love.
You think, imagine 360 million people, one giant couch.
Oh my God, how awesome would that be?
It's the ultimate Burning Man.
Because then it's similarity. I mean, it's ultimately celebrating our similarities, because, you know, if there's, you know, at our dinner table conversation, there's no question off the table every night with my kids, which can get a bit frightening with some of the questions that they ask. But actually, that's what you're saying here. No question off the table. How do we open it up and just celebrate the humanity and then these simple things? Danny, we want to be an engine behind your ideas here, because you speak a bit about these things, and I just think, how can we power that to help companies fuel that? I mean, imagine if 10 of the biggest companies actually subsidized financial literacy for millions of people.
That's huge.
Imagine if 100 corporations, and thinking that there's 1,000 corporations in the Facebook boycott, the anti-defamation Facebook boycott, all are who's supporting Black Lives Matter and equality. Imagine if those 1,000 organizations then put across their organizations mentorship programs, you know, that
I mean, I think those are easy, low-hanging fruit ones. I think organizations, maybe let's frame it up another way. It was a nice to have, just like sustainability was until it wasn't.
Yeah.
And then every company had to put it became a strategic imperative. It became a pillar on their strategic priorities. Sustainability. Well, race is in the same I think is in the same context. You know, unless you make it a strategic priority, it won't be invested on in the right way, and it won't be acted upon. So, and I think that brands that don't seem to understand that there's a wave that's coming in the youth. And, you know, this is why I drive innovation. I pay attention to consumer behavior. There's a wave, and that wave is, if I'm going to spend $300 with you, who are you, this brand? What do you represent? And I don't think that that's a luxury anymore. I think it's a necessity. I think if you're a brand today that doesn't start to think about what's happening in the world as a strategic priority, as a pillar, just like sustainability is, or any other areas of importance for you, I think within the next 5 years, you're going to potentially be struggling. Because my kids are growing up with an understanding of what a purpose-driven organization should be. At least my 2 children will, because they live with me, so they're stuck with that knowledge. But you can guarantee that every consumer out there is not, the days of I'm just going to walk into a Gap or a Zara or H&M and just buy whatever and not. I think those days are kind of over, because race and social inequality and the role that companies play in race and systematic racism is becoming clear. They play a much bigger role than that. We've given them the excuse or the assumption they haven't yet. That's where it sort of plays out in its most sort of subtlest, most, toxic, most damaging way. It's in the working environment where it matters, where it can hinder upward mobility for people of color. It does. Let me rephrase that. It does hinder people. It does, hide in plain sight, and it's hard to see. And there's no accountability. You could be, I think about my everyday experiences in corporate America, and I don't think there's a day you go, it's just built in. I think as a woman, I'm sure you can obviously relate to this in terms of some of the subtle ways that sexism plays out, which, and as a leader in tech, being a woman, you definitely understand that world. I sort of equate it, they're not exactly the same, but they're very similar in the way that things can just be sort of glossed over. Oh, it's just a woman. Oh, she's just imagining it. No, she's not just imagining it. What she's saying needs to be listened to, and as the level of respect that needs to be applied needs to be applied. And I think that race is the same thing. And so that's why I think some of the formulas that you solve in this area, it's not like it's in isolation. There's going to be really smart ideas around, how to combat some of the basic things that are happening in systematic racism that's transferable over to ageism, over to sexism. You're not just solving one problem, you're indirectly solving some of the other social issues that we have as well. Like, as a company, I think you'll find that 5 years from now, if you stood up and said, hey, like transparently, and said, these are the things we've done, and be able to point at your growth and your development, I think you're going to find that that's going to bode you in a much better light than the opposite. It just will. I only eat Ben and Jerry's now. Right? True story. And I love ice cream. From everybody, I love ice cream. But I'm touching Ben and Jerry's. Thank you. You're going to leave that. Ben and Jerry's. I'm buying Ben and Jerry's now because they've been committed to the words Black Lives Matter since 2014. Wow. Now, and what that says to me is there is an ongoing intent. They may not be doing all the right things. They may not be doing everything exactly as we want, but there is a strategic imperative that's had them consistently saying Black Lives Matter since 2014. Nike, who was held up and praised, said Black Lives Matter in a press release 3 weeks after it's sort of feeling the pulse. You go do your research. Up until that point, the words Black Lives Matter has never appeared in any communication from Nike up until probably a month ago. Yet we were standing up saying, wow, Nike's holding up, standing for equality. No, Nike said, just for once, don't do it, implying that this time around it's so bad that nobody should tolerate. Well, if you're a Black employee, do you know how that sounds? It doesn't sound very good. It sounds like you're tone deaf. Do you see? And so this is what we're dealing with. There's a certain amount of almost arrogance in a way that's sort of, that this is the formula, this is how it's always happened. I think for some it's arrogance, for some they don't know, because it is literally all they've known. For them, that's doing the right thing. Let's just put a marketing campaign, put it out, because that's what we do. But that's fine until you have an issue like police brutality based on race. Then it's no longer enough, not even close. And so you could immediately see the divide between what the brands were doing and what was going on in the world, where, brands are high-fiving each other because they stand in solidarity for racism in social media. Yay. No, that's inappropriate. And that's very tone deaf. And I think what you're seeing now is brands jostling to figure out, what can we get away with? What can we do that is a minimum viable product that will get us over this hump so we can go back to some level of normality in terms of the race relations within our working environment. That's never, the comfort is gone. That's not going to happen.
Which is so great, isn't it? Because the world has just changed.
correct.
so
And
dramatically. And this time, I mean, I do get excited at the voices of youth and how they can really change for how this is all changed for
I
good.
think I think we are eight, since, I've always believed in the cause. I have. That was what brought me to you, and that's what pulled me into what you were doing. I still believe in it. I think the idea now is probably stronger now than it's ever been. I think if you ever had a case study or a moment in time to sort of prove out your hypothesis, this moment is it, Sue. And the people's platform resonates now because it's the people's voice we're trying to get over the finish line. So yeah, I mean, I can't think of a better moment to sort of stand for something, which I know you always have done, and I've always been proud to work with you for that reason, and among lots of other reasons, of course, but that was certainly one of them. And I think that what you've got now is an opportunity to continue shining a light on. You've been calling this stuff on Facebook for years before it ever became a conversation. So your voice is important. Your voice is as important as mine. What you've done with WeAre8 as a blonde woman, from down under is incredible, given the environment that you have to navigate to get this to stand strong and have it be a credible brand. So all of those things are wins for you and I. All those things are positives. All those things are, it's sort of like the universe's way of telling you that you're good enough. You can do it because you're still standing, and that's the thing you have to remember is you're still there. You're still there.
Yeah.
And so it's so that the self-belief is real. I think the same emotional challenges that, people of color go through, I would imagine women go through in instances as well, especially in sort of a supercharged male-dominated environment like tech.
You
Right?
talk about things actually, Danny, and I really feel it in my gut because it's ultimately about judgment, right? Someone looks at you and thinks, can you run and lead a multi-billion-dollar company?
100%.
Can you? And they already have the narrative going on in their minds. And it's whether I'm a woman, whether I'm Black, whether I'm Hispanic, whatever I am, they are already.
They made it's the bias is already kicked in. It's someone saying to me, "Gosh, you're so articulate." So, that's an interesting statement. Well, what did you expect me to sound like? That's like, it's a tiny little one, or it's just, I mean, you get it. As a woman, I'm sure you have tons of them. It's just these little sort of microaggressions that feel like, they feel very light and fluffy. Oh, don't worry, I'm just joking. Sure. But what happens is, and this is the real danger of it, it's not the one isolated incident. Any of us are spiritually strong enough to shrug that off and move past it, but you're not having one of those. You're having about 20, 30 of them in a day. If you were to compound that together, that is an ulcer in the brain. Yeah. At the end of the day, that you have to somehow, deflate and get rid of in order for you to feel yourself again. And then you repeat that the next day. And I imagine that over a lifetime. Yeah, coupled with, I mean, this is what we're dealing with, right?
Really, Danny. And this is why, I'm so excited actually about the work that we can do together moving forward. I mean,
busy boy, but we're gonna figure something. This for me is important, as you can tell. I think we've all got to be about solutions. We've all got to be about solutions. If I sat here, people said, "Oh, you're brave. You're 45 years old and you've divorced corporate America." Absolutely, I divorced corporate America. Naked we came. Absolutely, I'm divorced. My wife and my kids deserve better. I'm not going to go and sell my soul for, bricks and mud to have more houses. I only need one. I don't need 1,000 of them. I only need one car. I don't need. So this is what I'm saying. There's an internal strength for a lot of Black people that people don't understand. We know how to survive with very little. Very little. I've been broke before. I know how to live broke you would never know. That we have that. So but
it's more than that. It's the resilience. It's that deep resilience. And honestly, Danny, it is also your time has come. I think this is the time for Black people, for women, for diversity, for
All of it.
the time. And I actually feel that one of the reasons I feel excited about the People's Platform, and actually through our infrastructure giving power to people at scale, is how it is really going to break through is bottoms up. Because us fighting to change this, we can put things in place that can help drive change. But when it comes up, like the culture that has been, whether it's every kind of culture is sort of driven by, and change is driven by Black people actually. So how that can be bottoms up until there's actually no question about whether we listen to everyone, because that's just the new way. They hold the power. The people hold the power.
Yeah, and
And
that's
people have to adapt.
no, you're absolutely right. I'm also conscious as this narrative plays out that it feels inclusive, because if again, and this is why I consult with brands, because there is a part of me that also recognizes that you're dealing with. I mean, you got to remember that, to your point, 99% of the white people I know are amazing people. They never saw themselves as racist, not even close. In some ways, they're almost embarrassed, and they find themselves in this awkward state of, gosh, how do I deal with this? Sorry, I'm gonna kill this, and you can just have to edit. I'm sorry.
No worries. All good.
Yeah.
Can you repeat that? Because that was good.
What did I
People
get
find
to?
themselves in this awkward state.
Yeah, and literally for them in this awkward state where they're asking themselves, how do I deal with this this issue of racism? I've never thought I'm that way inclined. Here I am being sort of confronted with this new reality that actually it's been around me all the time. How do I deal with it? And that's the part I'd say to people. I know there's a sense of urgency around this, and I'm probably going to get shot. I'm sure the Black community will hate me saying this, but I think if we're being realistic with ourselves, this is going to take time. I personally think the next year alone it should be reserved for ranting. I mean, it's like any relationship. I mean, think about it. It's like any relationship where if you're mourning, there are phases you go through. It's like, having a husband who's cheated on you and making you feel crazy for 5 years, and then finally realizing that you weren't crazy, it was true, right? I mean, think about how you deal with that situation.
You are a phenomenal. I just love chatting to you.